Hi, welcome to module, I guess this is module 3. This week, actually the next 2 weeks, we will be in this material. I gave it a little more time only due to that the material in here it covers a lot of stuff. So we're going to look at, the topic of this is addressing. So everything in networking is how do I get from computer 1 to computer 2? And what it uses is the TCP/IP layers to uh, give you a little bit more information about the data that's being passed. So starting from, you can't take the physical layer because all that is bits, ones and zeros, whether it's electrical or optical. So there's really no data there. But as you go up each of the additional layers, the data link layer, the network layer, and the transport layer, things are added to or taken away based on if the packet is coming or leaving a destination that helps addressing. So at the data link layer, it's your MAC address. That MAC address identifies the next physical device in your network. Every MAC address is a 48-bit device. It is broken up into two halves. 24 bits is what they call the OUI. And basically that is just the organization unique identifier. So each company has been given a label. And that first 24 bits identifies which company built that device. And when you're using some network tracking devices, you get that type of information. You get who they are. And then the last half is just that company's identification number, serial number, index number, whatever that company wants to use to identify, so they can then pinpoint which manufacturer, which device, which make, whatever database they want to track. That's at the MAC level. Then we go up to the network layer, which is the IP address. Now, the IP address, this chapter goes into a lot on IP addressing from the standpoint that there are two major categorizations of addresses. And a lot of it's just due to age of computer networking. You have an IPv4 addressing scheme and an IPv6 addressing scheme. And it goes through what those addressing schemes are, how they're identified, what they're made up, the things that have changed over time, whether I can identify an address, a physical computer on the internet or not in an IPv4 environment. It depends. To conserve, because there's fewer IP address available in an IPv4 environment, which you'll learn about, it's how do I now conserve space as they were trying to figure out the next evolution of addressing, which ended up being IPv6. But in that addressing scheme, see, some addresses can be only transmitted locally. Some can go across the internet, and then sometimes there's a way of translating an address from an internal network to an internet address. So you'll learn a little bit about that. Then you get IPv6 was created to get rid of a lot of the faults of IPv4 and limitations. So you'll get different types of addresses. It's 128 bits, so it's a very large number. Hopefully we'll never run out of devices that need that addressing scheme. So we'll spend a lot of time in this week in that. That's at the network layer. Then you got the transport layer where they says, okay, now I got a computer, but I have multiple applications running on that computer. That's what the transport layer does. Transport layer says, okay, how do I identify when your computer is, which application am I dealing with on that computer with what they call a socket, a port number, and when you get the IP address and a port number, that ends up being what they call a socket. So you're basically like you're plugging into that application into a specific location. And you'll learn a little bit about the different ports, different categories of ports, and how they're used. So you've got that category, you got all that addressing. Then you talked about none of us are good at numbers, right? So when was the last time you looked for Google by typing in its IP address? None of us typed in 192.168.12.56 to get to Google. You typed in google.com or www.google.com. There's a process that is DNS, domain name resolution process. So it's kind of like I'm trying to resolve a company's name or address with an IP address. And it goes through how do I organize those? How do I keep some that I need quickly? And the process of getting a new address or be able to understand somebody's typed in an IP address. How do I get to the name? And or somebody typed in a name. How do I get an IP address? So you'll talk a lot about cover that domain name process. And then the last part of this is troubleshooting. Because some of the things that you're going to do as a network administrator is you're going to do a lot of troubleshooting. So they talk about different techniques, commands both on the command line or in the GUI that you can use to troubleshoot a situation. So whether it's an invalid IP address, whether things aren't communicated, how do I know if my computer's on one particular network? This chapter goes through that. So it gives a lot of data. Now, granted, as we go into the rest of the semester, we'll delve more into the details of this. But at this moment, use this chapter, absorb a lot of this information. And if you have any questions, send me an email and we'll find a way to see if I can resolve the questions. Have a great week. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.